right, so I'll bring up Matt Young from USGS. Me and Matt actually go way back and kindred spirits and minnow enthusiasts. So, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Young.
I need to get my phone timer on so I stay on track. Because if I get off track, you guys will be here for hours. Okay. Okay. Sound coming through okay? Everybody good? Let me make sure. Okay. So my name is Matt Young. I'm a research biologist with the US Geological Survey. A completely different office than the volcano guy earlier, right? So the US Geological Survey encompasses a wide range of scientific enterprise. Some of us do fish and some of us do volcanoes, and you get both today. I'm here to talk about a variety of work that we, the USGS, have done associated with Clear Lake Hitch. I'm standing here, but a whole lot of people have worked on this. The names on this slide, other people, but we've been working closely, especially with Robinson Rancheria. So thanks to Luis and crew. This could go a whole bunch of different directions. Is this better? Yeah. Okay. This could go a whole bunch of different directions, but I want to focus on, what do we do? By we, I mean our sampling program with the US Geological Survey. Why do we do it? And what did we see this year? So I'm a simple person. I like simple questions. This is just a diagrammatic representation of the complex life cycle Felipe outlined earlier, right? So these fish are born in the streams, they come out, they spend time in the lake, they stage, and then they go back upstream to start the cycle over again. So we'll touch on this and similar life cycle diagrams multiple times, but this isn't new to you. You're probably familiar with Hitch. Most of what I'm going to be talking about today has to do with what goes on in the lake. That does not mean that the streams are not important. That's just where we've been focusing. So this map represents all of the lake samples that we've taken. We've been sampling since 2017, and each single point there's a tremendous amount of information. It's all of the fish that we captured at that point, and we also collect water quality information, including a full vertical. For those of you interested in like water quality modeling, we actually take a full vertical profile from the surface to the bottom. And so there's literally hundreds of thousands of data points. When do we do it? Right. So we've been out since 2017. Here's each of these plots is just like the flow in Kelsey Creek. So you can see, this is springtime when flow is high. We are out sampling in the lake in early summer after the tributaries have largely dried up. We want to sample the fish after they've reproduced, hopefully successfully, and when they're back in the lake, and we want to make sure that we're not missing any that are hiding in the tributaries. What do we do? You may or may not be familiar with the sort of work we do. We deploy experimental monofilament gill nets from boats. It's basically a very fine mesh or large mesh of fishing line that's between 6 and 12 feet tall. We use it deploy it for between 20 and 40 minutes so we don't stress out the fish and cause any unintentional mortality. Bring them in, measure them, weigh them, and release them. This is a picture of the Robinson Rancheria crew on their vessel, and this is the USGS vessel. We use a range of different mesh sizes in our nets so that we can sample a range of different fish sizes. So if you picture like a mesh, like a big net mesh is going to catch big fish, small mesh catches small fish. That's all this figure represents. Like we could talk about any of this in more detail if you want. So why do we do it this way, right? We touched on our goal is to focus on Hitch. This is another way to think about that life cycle, right? So we have what they do in the streams. They start out as an egg. They go through this larval stage, and then eventually they enter the lake. They get older in the lake, and once they reach a certain age, they will start the process over again. With some spawning in the lake, which is a whole nother nuance that we can touch on too. Overlaying sort of our earlier, simpler conceptual diagram, but this is what we do. This is what this gill net survey is designed to do, is to focus on these fish that are either 1 year old or older. They're in the lake, and they are available to spawn during the next spawning window. So this is effectively a repeatable index of the abundance of this adult portion of the population. There's a whole bunch of other work that goes on, which you've heard about, Felipe touched on, other people have touched on, that fit into different parts of this life cycle model. And now one of the big challenges and opportunities for this community is tying it all together and figuring out how all these pieces fit to tell a broader story. But again, I'm focused on this. So I'll talk about the results from our 2024 survey here. All of the data up to 2024, so 2017 through 2023, is publicly available. There'll be a link, QR code for this link later if that's your interest. The 2024 data we collected it this year. It hasn't gone through the full final approval, so it has this little disclaimer where it's not yet publicly available. We're working on getting it QC'd, and it's just, we'll get that out as soon as possible. So this is a figure that some of you may have seen before. On the x-axis, the bottom part of this map figure is just each year, and the y-axis is the relative abundance of Hitch. So this is in terms of fish per hour spent fishing, right? So you spend a lot of time, you catch a few fish, that's a small number, etc. We documented fairly substantial, dramatic declines in 2022 and 2023. These numbers, like 2022 represents 6 individuals. So we only caught 6 adult Hitch in all of our efforts. 2023, we saw a fairly substantial rebound, if you will. We captured individuals, I guess I'll put it that way. And this is what things look like for 2024. So this is the grand sum total of all of the work that we did this year, partially was to generate this number. There's a whole lot more information that we collect than just the sum total or average of fish density that we encounter. So you can think about one of the most important pieces of this information has to do with the age structure of the population, right? Is this population made up of a mix of young, medium, and old-aged fish, or is it all one age class that's really driving the abundance that we see? You can see in 2017, there was a very large number of juvenile fish, and then, adults. As you go down the next year, you can see that these juvenile fish survived, and a lot of them got bigger, but there wasn't as much juvenile production, right? And so you can just keep following that down. These fish, some survived, got a little bigger. These fish, some fewer survived, but got a little bigger. And then 2022, or I should add 2019, 21, and 22, there was very little evidence for substantive juvenile contributions to the population. I'm not going to say there wasn't any juvenile contributions to the population, but there wasn't a lot. 2023 was great. It was such a relief to all of us who were out on the water, who were invested in the species, just to see something that was less dismal than the numbers that we saw in 2022. And perhaps most encouraging was this resurgence of some evidence of successful reproduction. 2024 looks in some ways a little bit more like 2019 in that there are very low density of juvenile fishes, and there's evidence for these fish, aging, and some survived, aged, and grew. There's a nuance here I want to touch on, and many of you may have picked up on this, right? I talked earlier about how we are not looking at juvenile fish. We're looking at fish that are a year old or older. So these numbers you see here that say juveniles, these are fish that were actually born the preceding spring. So fish we captured in 2017 were born in 2016, and vice versa. So what this means is that these fish born in 2023 we encountered in 2023, were actually born in 2022, which is quite the enigma. For those of you who saw Val's talk just right before the break, she told us that there was no water in Kelsey Creek in all of 2022. So where'd the fish come from? And that's quite literally the question that I'm not going to answer today. But I do want to talk about some of the tools that we use to explore these sorts of questions, right? So this is the information that we have available from our month or annual surveys in the lake based on the gill nets. Oh no, this is the wrong version and I can't tell you what the other stuff was. I am devastated. I'm so sorry. I can tell you what it was going to be. Do you want me to tell you what it was going to be? Okay. So can we go to the life site? Can we just like bring up the presentation again? I swear, we went through this ahead of time. We like had this queued up. It was going to be good. We like checked it at lunch. All right. So let's just start with this life cycle. So everything that I've talked about is focused on this part, right? So we're looking at what these fish are doing in the lake, how many of them are there? One of the a major question that we want to know is fish that are going back to spawn, these adult fish, where did they come from? Which tributaries were they born in? And does that change over time, right? Is one tributary good one year and then a different tributary good the following year? And how does that relate to the total abundance of fish you see in the population? So through some very fancy analyses, we will actually keep a very small subset of the fish we encounter. We will extract various tissues from them. Specifically, the two that we like the most are otoliths, which are ear bones. So fish have these little bones right here that are calcium carbonate. They're made, they're deposited sequentially, and they're made from basically the water that they live in. And you can use these otoliths to recreate the water chemistry that fish experienced in its entire life. So imagine like a little tree ring type deal. And at the center of the tree ring is when the fish was born, and at the edge of the tree ring is when it died. Is that good? Can people like, this is so much fun without pictures. So what we can do is look at the transect across the entirety of that fish's life, all of those tree rings, and see which water bodies it was born in. So through that, we were able to show that fishes from 2017 used many, if not all, of the tributaries that were out there, which is super interesting and super cool. And we're looking to expand on that and evaluate tributaries in different years and success of fish from those tributaries and recruiting to the spawning population. The second tissue, I have time. So the second tissue we really like are eyeballs. And this is my thing. I'm an eyeball person. So fish eyes do the same thing. Imagine you have a little eye, right? I can do this, right here. There's a lens, just like we have. There's the lens at the center of the eye. That lens is laid down similar to an otolith, similar to tree rings. So at the beginning, the core of that lens, you can see what that fish was eating right after it was born. And then at the outside of the lens, you can see what it was eating right before it died. So you can recreate its diet from birth to death. And through that work, we were able to show that these Hitch, science is so cool. Thank you. Through that, we were able to show that Hitch will go ahead and move into the nearshore habitats of the lake when they're about yay big, about 4 inches, 3 to 4 inches. They'll be in the nearshore. By the time they reach 6 to 7 inches, most of them are offshore. So out in the middle of the lake, foraging on zooplankton and using completely different habitat than they are at other sizes. Using these two tools together, we can now say that this fish was born in this tributary. It left this tributary when it was 37 days old, moved to the near shore of the lake, lived there for 3 months, and then went out to the middle of the lake. And so we can use that, when we have enough individuals, we can use that to get a sense for which strategies are effective in leading to reproductive success. I so wish you could have seen all the pictures. I'll see what I can do about getting that updated in the publicly available digital booklet for the meeting. Yeah. So, no, it's totally, I mean, I don't blame anybody. But what I do want to point out, and I'll just leave it here for now. Well, I would like to acknowledge a whole bunch of people, first of all, right? So there's the agencies and groups represented on this slide, including Robinson Rancheria, Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. among a host of others. But I also want to call out the Clear Lake Hitch Task Force that Felipe chairs. It's something we participate in, and it's a really valuable forum. And then a colleague of ours did the excellent illustrations. But the last thing I want to leave this with is all of the information that I presented here and all of the studies that I referenced are all publicly available and can be accessed with any of these QR codes. So if you want any of the data on the fish catch itself or any of the chemistry data and for otoliths or eye lenses, you can see that. Or if you just want the summary of the different papers that describe a lot of these things and where a lot of the illustrations that myself and Felipe used, they're available through these QR codes too. Yeah, that's it for me.
We have time for a question or two while we pull up the next doc. Is that okay, Matt?
Yeah.
All right. Any questions for Matt? Nobody wants to go in the nitty gritty about stable isotope analysis? Okay. Oh.
And this is me also making sure that we have enough time to get the next presentation up so you can speak slowly. This is fascinating, fabulous. Again, we're so pleased to have more data and more data available. So if you could just walk us through these QR codes and answer questions like, how often are you updating the data? Do you have any, like I know USGS has some pretty clear restrictions on when you're able to release data and that there's been frustration, especially from tribal partners, when they weren't able to get that data in a timely fashion. So how are we addressing that? And yeah, if you could just go through each one of the QR codes. When it says chemistry, what do you mean? When you say isotopes, what do you mean? When you say glade habitats, what do you mean? Etc. Merci.
Absolutely. So I'll start with I'll start with the studies because they're very easy. These are just links to the papers that are in the scientific literature that build upon these data. I'll touch on these data now. So the first QR code is for our fish catch data, and that's the one that is updated annually as we get our information in our catch. So we'll collect, the way it works at the U.S. Geological Surveys, we will collect data. It has to go through a fairly rigorous internal quality control screen to make sure that those data points are, accurate, collected with the precision and accuracy we expect, and are representative of the protocols that we are enacting. So that process can take anywhere from 2 to 6 months, depending. And so that's the delay that you were referring to earlier, is it takes us a little while for us to get data through this screening step to make sure that we're not releasing data that has any inaccuracies in it. This data is updated every year. It's currently under review now. We anticipate it should be fully publicly available within the next, I don't want to pigeonhole myself, but within the next few months, certainly, hopefully much sooner. This data includes our catch, the water quality that's associated with each net, and the location. Chemistry refers to the water chemistry information that was available, that was used for the otolith analyses. So there's information on a whole host of constituents that can be found in different water bodies. The most relevant is the isotopes of strontium in each particular water sample and fish sample. So in this data release, you would see information about strontium isotopes from fish bones, which I think is awesome, but there is a lot of interpretation needed to go along with that. With each of these data releases, there is extensive documentation saying exactly what each number means and how they should be interpreted. The third one, the final one that just says isotopes, that is a release of the isotopes of carbon and nitrogen from the Hitch fish tissues of interest. So we use carbon and nitrogen as a way to track what organisms have been eating. You are what you eat. So the carbon in you is the spaghetti you ate 2 weeks ago, or salad, whatever your diet preferences are. But that's what that data release is the carbon and nitrogen isotopes that can be found in both fish Hitch muscle tissue and the eye lenses that I was discussing.
Thank you, Matt.
So the QR code campaign has been disabled for some reason. Your QR code reader scanner is working fine.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for scanning.
So that was why there was a new version of this presentation, is because the QR codes don't work. So this is truly catastrophic.
Okay.
What can I make a suggestion? What if I get it on the computer so at the break they're all up on the screen? Can I do that?
So there's this big firewall between me and the techies.
Okay.
And right now the techie is trying really hard to get the next talk up. We apologize for all technical difficulties, which were not within my purview. What we might be able to do is, do you have that slide on your phone? No.
No. I have it on my computer.
You have it on your computer. Is it anywhere on a website?
Only yours. Only your website.
Okay. Well, then, what we will promise to do is we will prioritize the uploading of your correct talk to the CLIS website on the Lake County Water Resources Department page, where all digital files of all presentations will be uploaded as soon as we can. That's the best I can do. And I am sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah.
Did you have a question? Okay. Let's give Meg the microphone.
So I have a two-part question. Could you please bring up, this isn't one of those questions, but could you bring up the age class structure survey results? Thank you. So given that 2024 results look a lot like the 70% drop that happened in 2019, I heard you use the word rebound for last year's results, and then you're like, oh, I don't want to say that. Given what you were saying about 2022 and there not really being the fish available to create the juveniles that were caught in 2023, can you speak to that a little bit? And then here's a what if, like there were a lot of rescues in 2023. Did those contribute to the big juvenile catch?
Excellent question. There are a lot of pieces here, and I'll try to answer them as I remember them. And if I'm missing a piece, shout back at me. Yes. So one of the big questions, so maybe I won't answer them in exactly the way you asked, but one of the big questions and uncertainties is really figuring out where this is coming from, right? Is this the success of something that we are doing actively, some active management that's happening in the system that is saving the juvenile fish, bringing them to the lake, and that's the critical bottleneck? If we can do that, we can make this. It's hard because then there were a lot of rescues in 2023, and then we didn't necessarily see a commensurate rebound in 2024. So, is there some other place that these fish, some other habitat that we're not effectively sampling that we don't understand very well that is leading to these sorts of dynamics? That's also possible. So I think getting a sense for what is causing these very clear, successful recruitments into this 1+ age class is one of the key scientific and management uncertainties in the system.
Okay, here's my follow-up question. Will your 2024 data that's not yet available for publication be available to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service before they make their decision in January?
That is very, very, very high on our priority list. Like this high on our priority list. Yeah.
So yes?
Yes.
Okay.
So one of the things although the data are not fully publicly available in their raw form, this, right, is publicly available. This presentation is publicly available and is something that Fish and Wildlife can use in any way that they see fit. Be fishes and wildlife, both state and federal.
Yeah, and we'll have to hold all the questions until we're actually about 20 minutes behind. So Okay. Okay. Well. Okay. Okay. So we'll get Ben Ewing's talk. Okay. One last question.
Hi, Philippe. We met a few months ago. My question is simple. In a given tributary, let's say Hitch Creek, currently known as Kelsey Creek, starts at 1,300 lake level and goes up to 3,000 feet up in Cobb. How high does the Hitch go up that tributary?
That is such a good question. So the question was, how high do Hitch go up tributaries? And right now, and I am not necessarily the best person to answer this. Ben Ewing and Felipe might actually be better suited for this. But my understanding, basically, they can go until they hit an obstruction. In most tributaries, there are obstructions that are the defining limit to upstream movement. We don't see fish above this point. We don't know how much further up they get beyond that point because they can't access it. An unsatisfactory answer, I know. I imagine, what I can say is that I imagine it's going to have to do with the gradients involved. Once the stream reaches a certain steepness, they're just not going to be interested in going any higher or spawning in those locations. I'll take questions until they tell me otherwise. So,
Isn't there a waterfall on Kelsey Creek somewhere, like a 17-foot one?
yeah, absolutely. And so that would be in that watershed. That would be the natural upstream limit to migration. In the other watersheds, what does that look like relative to topography is gonna differ. And I defer to folks like Ben and Luis Santana.
That's a good segue.
Thank you.